In the many offerings by Grace Healing, from videos to articles to events, you will encounter the word spiritual. It is used in more than one application. The word spiritual with a small s describes things of a lesser nature. Simply put, things that move you away from God. When you see the word spirit with a capital S, it is referring to the nature and attributes of God. Those things that move you toward God or reflect God in our experience and walk of life. Ask yourself these simple questions. Is the nature of my actions, my perspectives, and what I'm witnessing bringing me closer to reflecting God's nature to others, or moving me away from reflecting God to others? Is my position within this experience increasing the vibrational frequency, godlike, higher vibrations? Or is my position within this experience decreasing the vibrational frequency, the small s spiritual influence, or energy drainers, for example, negative feelings and influences? You have been given the authority to release the lesser and embrace the higher. This can only be done when we consistently engage in divine love rather than the lesser natures. This is the topic and relating questions we are exploring in our discussion today with Larry and Ina. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Larry and Ina. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
It is great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we agreed today to dive into the topic of the meaning and the difference between the word spirit and spiritual, small s, spiritual versus spirit with the capital S.
Yeah.
Before we're going to explore this, I was just yesterday reading a little post from a spiritual friend of mine on Facebook. She's in Germany. And I want to read this real quick because I think it illustrates a little bit what people are going through and how spiritual influences are influencing our life.
Wonderful.
So she writes, sometimes I wonder where all the compassion and humanity has gone for those who are on the spiritual path and suddenly follow the path of fear, distance, inhumanity, illness, abolishment of fundamental rights, and robotic, soulless society, and believe that illness is their truth. Have you forgotten why you are here on earth and how you're meant to live in abundance, good health, for 1,000 years and longer to enjoy divine creation? Shift your perception away from fear to the highest, most blissful timelines and see that nothing of this is true. Become immune against the dark forces who try to distract you from your spiritual path by telling you that illness is your reality. So I thought, to me, that encapsulates what's going on in this world and why people are confused.
Agreed.
And and sometimes reading this in that last section where it says, shift your perception is sometimes easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
Larry, I know you have spoken a lot about, what the spiritual influences do in our life. Can you enlighten us maybe in the context of this text that I just read?
I want to kind of leap off of what you started with capital S spirit and versus spiritual. And I know you gave an introduction related to this, but people need to understand when they're talking about a spiritual path, every single bit of creation is on a spiritual path. This isn't just those people that that are seeking spiritual understanding. Even the people that are blind to it are spiritual first. They are formed in spirit first, then they enter into the human existence. So there is every one of us walking a spiritual path. This is a segment of our spiritual journey in this human form. And then we return on a spiritual path in a spiritual nature, meaning higher form spirit. And again, high S, capital S spirit is God. So when you're asking, if you could restate the question again, what your question was in that.
Well, in the last part of her post, she said, shift your perception away from fear to the highest, most blissful timelines, basically, in essence, that's what she said. And I'm wondering, it's easier said than done. You know,
Right. And again, as we've shared from the covenant and love, it's because people have lost sight of the order of the heavens and how they interact with one another. They've lost sight of the fact that the body is a map revealing to us things of a spiritual nature going on within it. Do we find on a daily basis when we get in conversation with people that we're constantly going, constantly clearing our throat as we're talking to them? That's a simple sign of a small s spiritual influence of resistance, where you're resisting stating absolute truth, or you're resisting sharing the nature of what really needs to be shared, and you're off speaking about other things that have nothing to do with what you really want to say, because you're avoiding it out of either fear or judgment or critical nature. So the body map will evidence these things. If an elder person is experiencing macular degeneration, separation of issues within the cornea, all the different things that transpire, that is judgment-based. There is a form of judgment present with this. Could be high judgment, a person cast from the church. We've seen this in many cases where women were raped, and then the church in the early stages kicked them out because they were the ones raped. It's like, wait a minute, those were the ones that needed the love, caring, and healing, but then they carried in their lives this stigma, this shame, this guilt of being judged. And eventually it manifests as a judgment within the eyes cast upon them, and it becomes macular degeneration. So now we go to what's happening as your friend was speaking upon the earth, and we're witnessing a manifestation of illness that is predominantly lung-centered. What we are witnessing within the body of humanity overall, so many people affected and impacted by this specific influence, lung-based, grief, sadness, sorrow. What we're seeing within the body of humanity, that some people, this isn't even touching at all. They're not even being bothered by it in the least. Those are the people that are not carrying unresolved grief. They're not carrying deep sorrows. They're not carrying heavy sadness. Those that are being hit by it might be those that have quietly set aside a grief within their life, and they've managed it okay, but they haven't released the small s spiritual influence of the spirit of grief. They haven't actually sat before the presence of God and done as Yeshua instructed us, which was set the captive free. That spirit, ethereal being, spiritual influence, return it to capital S, Spirit God. Honestly, like a child standing here holding a balloon with the string under tension because the balloon is floating there. And people say, well, how do I let go of it? But you have to open your hand to let it go. In order for that balloon or that spiritual release to be freed, you're the one who has to let go of the tendrils and ties that you formed about it. And there are people that have become so entwined by the nature of this experience that they get the string all wrapped around their hand, that wrapped through their fingers, and they open their hand, but they're still not able to release it because they still hold tendrils and defining points upon it. They're defined by the nature of the suffrage or the experience that they went through. They've forgotten that they are actually defined by God, not their experiences. The experiences that we have gone through are present for us to magnify God's glory and to remind us of God, not to become trapped in the trauma of experience. So if we remember God within us, God defines us, God is the very nature of who I am in this moment, because I surrender to be that which is God. I become nothing so that all that God is within me can become evidenced for others to see. That is what we'll present, is God as God defines us, not as our trauma defines us.
Very good. Back to that statement, shift your perception away from fear. That's basically what you described. Aina, question to you. There's a difference, or let's say the challenge for many people is to recognize divine love, to recognize God, because they've never seen it. It's something that we can't grasp, we can't see it, right? That divine love. And some people address that by being in service to God, you know, through certain ministries, etc. And I know you have been very much involved in ministries throughout your life. And then there's the other side, which is to be truly in love with God. And we talked about that before. So it seems like there's that bridge that we would want to cross, that we're not just in service to God, but that we want to be truly in love with God. How do you see that, Aina, through your experience in your life?
Well, that's quite interesting, because actually the intimacy and relationship with God is between you and God in your relationship. It's a choice that we want to embrace. And I know all of us are different, but on the most part, developing that relationship, just like developing a relationship with a best friend or with your own parents, to sit and allow God to be magnified and just to be at peace, surrender, and to be in his presence. On that note, yes, I've been involved in many ministries. And what I found, it is exactly what rises on my heart, is this word. The scripture says, you will know them by their fruit. And many, many times there have been people that truly just do not have a deepened relationship with God, but they choose, it's almost like a striving that there is something that they're supposed to do. They're striving in ministry. They're trying to make things work. And you find the lesser spiritual even rise in ministry, where they're trying to make it regimented. And that ultimate love for that person that they're actually trying to minister to, it goes in reverse. It's like, it's just this what was Larry was speaking about, the little s and the big S. That can also reflect in ministry, how we treat others. So there's that as well. And I've seen that in ministry time and time again, where you do see those that have a deepened relationship in God and those that do not. Because for whatever reason, whatever their walk is, there are many that feel that they should be in service, but they lack that part of just surrendering and receiving the fullness of who God is within them. Because if we would truly do that, surrender in the true love of who God is, because it's that simple to be childlike. And I could speak that right now. And there are many people that say, yeah, and they tell you, oh yeah, I got this. Well, there it is right there. They got it. Meaning, do they really? I didn't need to hear that. That's between them and God. But you'll know them by their fruit. You just know them, and you're drawn to certain people. And there's people that don't have that, and they're drawn to the light and the love of who you are, but they won't release it. They're just holding on into that lesser, smaller spirit, instead of allowing the greater of God to magnify. And the whole reason for having the fullness of God's love, it's not to have the greater ministry. It's not to have this abundance of wealth upon the earth. Oh, sure, we want a balance of all that because we have to live in it. But the bottom line is the love of God. So it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you have, where you've been. Then you can release the captives that are in you. Because when we seek God first, it just comes upon us. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you, where the love is concerned. It's very individual.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And one of the key words that you bring up is the word surrender. And surrender to me always had a little bit of a negative connotation. Like giving up things. And if I give up things, then I'd be missing things, and I'm missing out on life. I mean, that's, I think, a perception that's out there for many people too. So, yes. So how do we deal with surrender in a way that it is divine?
I'd like to kind of key off of something that Ina Marie said on that. And one of the first parts of the subject that she touched was how people don't sit and allow. They honestly don't sit in the presence of God and allow for God to minister to them. Life is too busy. I got this thing to do. I got to get to work. I got to do this. I got to make breakfast. I got to go there. I got to meet this client. I got to do. And what happens is we don't allow for that moment to be in God's presence. And people don't need to race off to a church building. They don't need to go to a temple. They don't need to run to the shore. They don't need to find a specific rock or a specific tree. You can just sit and be present with God anywhere. And if they sit and allow, then they will discover God's love. But again, most people are not allowing for the cacophonous nature of the world and the din that's in the world, all the noise, all the calamities, all the things that are going, they won't allow themselves long enough to even breathe 3 simple breaths in God's presence.
And why is that? Why don't they allow it?
They've been programmed to think that they have to constantly be in the process of doing, like you said, not willing to surrender. They're not willing to actually recognize that surrender is where the power is. If I surrender all that I am to become all that God is, in other words, everything I perceive myself to be, and allow myself to become that which is God, I discover a love that is in me that is greater than I ever thought Larry could extend. I become part of the divine God love. And actually, we're going to provide a tool for people through this on the website, but there's one segment within it that I want to state it right now and let you guys dialogue over it. But it says, please allow God to remind you of what it is like to truly be in love with God, and let the love deepen in you for God. Not just in service, like you said, Andreas, but truly in love with God, which means embracing full trust and integrity before God in all of God's holy nature. Then protect that love by not allowing anything of a lesser nature to rise within you or your calling. So protecting that love is not allowing anxiety to enter in. Protecting that love is not allowing anger to enter in. Protecting that love is not allowing fear to enter in. And then let ourselves be heightened in that moment where we sit and allow for God's presence to redefine us. The first time we engage in new relationship in love, we become heightened in this desire to want to know them more, to really want to know what's the next thought that they have. Or do you ask a question, well, what did you do in this situation? Or tell me about that story of your life. And you develop a fervent desire to want to know more about this person. We don't sit and allow ourselves to surrender to God. We're not doing that. We're not demonstrating true love for God to say, okay, what is God? How amazing is God? How deep is this love? How far reaching is this love? Because we don't allow ourselves that place to surrender and become the definition of divine love over human love. Divine love, pure, clarity, peace, wisdom, healing, all aspects of the nature of God. The lesser form is that human form, that love comes with alcoholism and the ability to try to fix alcoholics or whatever. And it becomes cacophonous. It becomes filled with noise and devoid of pure love, because it's constantly in a place of doing instead of constantly in a state of embracing, support, sustaining, and propelling people forward through internal expression of life.
Aina, along the note what Larry just said, Aina, do you have a special place or a special time where you sit and allow? How does that look like in your life?
Well, I'll tell you that when, as he was talking, it reminded me as reflecting and pondering back in the years, because being involved in ministry, being involved in a regimented, traditional Christian home did not permit me to go deeper where I am now. So when God moved us to Wisconsin, it was in that time that I personally chose to surrender into God's presence I didn't learn that in a book. I did recognize the word of God and looked at things differently than I did in the religious background that I was brought up in. So what I found was that surrendering in the quietness of the northern Wisconsin, where there was nobody, I felt that I needed, they call it like the secret place and all that. However, now is developing that. It's anywhere I am now. Finding that place is the deepened relationship of God, because we all, sometimes if that's an excuse, then we're not in that deepened place, because some of us, God will meet us right where we are. And at that time in my life, because I chose, that's what my divine thing was just to fall in love with, I want more. That was me. I did everything possible to take myself out of the reality of humanity at that time. And God met me there in the wilderness of Wisconsin. But now, as growing and deepening in God's awareness that's within me, that's magnified no matter where I am in the midst of a storm, even someone yelling at me for whatever reason it might be, even my own son yesterday, certain things, I could still find that peace, because then the smaller S goes away, releasing that and praying for him, because I know where I am rooted in God's relationship. So it comes right back, surrender back into God's presence, surrender back into God's presence, no matter where you are. It depends on the individual. That's why we here at Grace Healing, we take great care in who those God brings across our path. It's not a cookie cutting, cha-ching, cha-ching, same person, this person. That's where, unfortunately, the church in general has a certain format that they want to try to get you into, because they yet, individuals, haven't reached a place of seeking God first and seeing what is best for that individual. So again, when you're asking me where my secret place is, or my it's right here. It's at the golf course. It goes with me now. I'm in a whole different place. So
yeah, that's good. Yet we all have to still, to a degree, deal with that reality of humanity. We can't just step away from that. We have to, or we want to live with our families, with our friends. We have to work and have good relationships with people. So, and that notion of protecting that love of God comes in. You know, how do you do that, Larry? How, you know, Ina just described, for her, it has become first nature, not second nature, first nature, right?
Exactly.
But it's not everybody's first nature. I'm still grappling with it. Sometimes I get angry at something and don't quite know how to deal with it. How can I protect that love of God?
Well, I would say, first of all, you're still grappling with it. I'm still grappling with it. I'm sure Ina Marie still every single one of us is still grappling with it. And I think the key to remember is, you and I did a video recently, I forget when it was, but we did a video where we really got animated about this whole subject, about moving from the many breaths to one breath. Ina Marie looking at the secret place becoming every place. So there is a practiced awareness that we develop throughout our spiritual journey, like you said, Andreas, of becoming first nature, not second nature. It's not my second nature to draw to God. It's my first nature to go to God as I witness everything. In my honest understanding, that is the only way to deal with the cacophonous nature of the earth, the din that comes up from people attacking or comments or spiritual things rising, that sense of moment that makes a person angry or whatever. So again, it's coming back to what Ina Marie says about taking this simple thought of the secret place becoming every place. Or when you and I were talking in a video once, Andreas, we were talking about, I've worked with many masters, I've worked with many, Kung Fu teachers and many yoga teachers that work in the meditative process. And what I found within them was this progressive desire that, oh yes, I'm up to about 6 hours of meditation today. And I hear about this other one that's, oh, I was doing meditation for 90 minutes the other day. And and this other person talking about, well, I was in meditation for, it was about 100 minutes the other day. And I'm like, to what end? Where are you going with this? And when I was talking with actually a Kung Fu master that spent a great deal of focus helping people in meditation, and I was also talking with a yogi, they were in this constant progressive realization of separating themselves from life because they found more time in meditation. And I was asking them the simple question, what if your progressive realization of understanding of deepening in breath, expansion of breath, was to move you to touch that 90 minutes of meditative breathing in a single breath? Not that your 30 minutes of meditation would become 60 minutes, become 90 minutes, become 140 minutes, become 4 hours of meditation, but that meditative awareness at the end of 6 hours can be available for you in a single breath. So again, it goes back to the same concept that Ina Marie was saying, that the single place becomes every place. The single breath over many breaths. If you can develop the practiced awareness that the first response is God, the first reaction is God, the first nature is God, then the single breath is God in that moment. So now the din of the earth, the anger of the moment, whatever, that single breath is first nature, God first. That's how we become that surrender into allowance, that surrender into truth, that surrender into love, is quite frankly, it becoming first nature. And our lives on this earth provide us plenty of opportunity to practice. We have many opportunities to practice, to go, oh, wait a minute, the gap moment presents, I breathe, I choose God. And that becomes first nature.
Yeah, Larry, you talked about structure. You talked about some teachers that structured their meditation around a time frame,
Yep.
of long or short time frames. And it's just a reality that humans need structure, right?
Yep.
And what you just described with the breath and the gap moment and all that is a sense of structure that we need. And I want to just address one more topic, the structure of prayer, which we talk a lot about, that grace healing. And Ina, how do you pray? Let me just ask you that way.
Well, as I make it real simple, it's childlike. It's just like talking with you. However, that's developed the same way as developing a relationship with God. Prayer is first seeking God and allowing your tongue to flow in the breath of seeking God, deepening in breath, because that's tangible. It brings at least the realization of your life being is the breath. And prayer is just talking. Prayer is listening. Prayer is being quiet, seeking God first. And prayer is receiving, just to receive his love. And prayer is praying for others, interceding for others. Prayer is a multitude of just not, okay, let's get it going. Okay. Thou Father, hallowed be thy name. There's nothing wrong with that, but that is so just sticky. Is that really from the heart? Prayer is seeking God first, allowing him to lead and guide you, and it flows like a river. Sometimes that prayer is that you're just talking with him, you just want to be alone, or it's just being in silence. Maybe it's a time for you to receive and be aware, an awareness of God's love in you, being at peace. So prayer is a multitude. If you were to, as you're asking me, others would give you a whole different definition, which is quite interesting. And yet God will meet them where they are, because that's where they are. So it's quite interesting. Prayer is different. And if you were to ask somebody else that's traditionally based in their religion.
And I'm gonna ask Larry in a minute. Larry, when you hear somebody say, Oh God, please help me and free me from the spirit of anxiety. That's what people say, that are captured by fear, right?
Exactly. Yep.
How do you, I know what you're going to say, so please say it.
We've been hanging out for a little while, so you kind of get the direction right off there. The bottom line is people have a tendency to come before the prayer in supplication. In other words, like you said, oh God, please help me. Instead of, God, I love and trust you so much, I know you've already helped me. And I'm just saying that in the beginning so that people understand it is already complete within God. So instead of saying, oh God, please help me to be freed from anxiety, why not embrace it in thanksgiving? Yahweh, God and Creator, thank you that you receive from me anxiety as I embrace your presence within. So again, we're going to go through the spiritual, small s spiritual influence, and we're going to embrace the capital S spirit in its place. We release the spirit of anxiety, small s spirit anxiety, and embrace God through trust, love, clarity, discernment, and peace. So instead of being governed by anxiety, we embrace these things in the opening prayer through thanksgiving. Then we just sit and allow, like Ina Marie said. And then we become the living prayer. All of a sudden, from this moment of peace, you find within you divine wisdom coming within your thoughts. You find an order and a structure into how you're supposed to respond to the matters you're facing. And because you've sat and allowed, not only did you engage first in prayer and thanksgiving, second in the surrender into God that is within you, then you become a living prayer. The words begin to form in your mouth that you're supposed to speak. The tasks that you're going to undertake become ordered within your thought process, and you engage in them. And the cool thing about the living prayer is now God has preceded you in those. So the tasks you undertake are going to go smoother and easier, almost serendipitously, that all of a sudden people line up that are supposed to be there, things happen, people answer the phone that don't usually answer the phone. Things happen that evidence God within the totality of what Ina Marie described as prayer. Prayer is not just a single thought. Prayer is the conclusive realization of God present within our lives. We can either do it through supplication in the beginning, and I pray with so many people on a daily basis, and I'm finding it so joyful to witness that people that come in a prayer of supplication to go, no, I need to correct myself. I really need to say thank you because I already feel the change happening in me. Once they're attuned to it, they're like, oh, wait a minute. I said, God, please. And I said, no. God, thank you that you are complete within this. God, thank you that your strength renews me. God, thank you that your presence receives anxiety and I embrace holy trust in you. And their prayer shifts and it becomes a prayer of living reality of God instead of, oh, God, fix this. It's cool stuff.
It is. Well, we're coming to an end here. Before I give both of you the final word, I'd just like to add some thoughts of some of the notes I made, what I got out of it. So we started our discussion about the difference between spirit, capital S, and spiritual, small s. And we talked about the reality of humanity, that we find ourselves being pulled in one or the other direction, and learning or not learning for some of them how to deal with those situations. We learned that what it takes is to just sit and allow, be quiet and listen, learn to listen and have that intimacy with God, which is only possible if we go within and we sit and allow. And then at the end, like Larry said so beautifully, we become the living prayer. And that living prayer will build the foundation for our everything, abundance, happiness, health, whatever we need. So Ina, I just want to give you first an opportunity to just say what may still be on your heart before we wrap it up.
Well, I just have to share again the love of God, of seeking God first, how important that is, because that is the core of our being. is having that relationship. And that's why one of the reasons I'm here with Grace Healing, there's no hindrance or reservation in this walk with Grace Healing, because we specifically seek God first. And it's the love of who he is, because that's what brings healing, restoration, renewal. It's everything in balance and order unto him. It brings happiness, peace that surpasses all understanding. His love is so amazing that you can't explain that in words. For them to experience it, it is all about the love and the amazing God that not only we serve, but know of his love that's within us, the intimacy of God's love. That's what I really want to share, is the love of God above everything.
Thank you, Ina. Larry?
Well, I would like to say that I support every word that Ina Marie just uttered. The simplicity, I think in the process of our human lives, we forget that it's simpler than we've made it. God has made it so simple, and God has given us the power to make the change within ourselves. The problem is we don't utilize that because we've made it more convoluted, more difficult, more challenging, because we have to go to this person, or we have to go to that counselor. Or if I throw my back out, I'm running around on stilts doing a project or whatever, and I throw my back out. Oh, I got to go to a chiropractor. No, I don't. I sit with the presence of God. I allow for myself to be revealed in how I allowed for something to enter my body, to knock the alignment out of place. I breathe, I center, things come back into alignment. I'm clear, I'm moving with greater ease. Even at 60 years old, I move better than I did when I was in my 40s. Because I found the breath of God within these regions of my body. And it is as simple as allowing ourselves that place, that connection back unto God, in the nature of God within my body, not the experiences of the day, not the demands upon my body, but God's presence girding me up, strengthening me, and moving me forward. So again, if we're in life, we're experiencing things that do not, I mean, if you read that thing in the intro that you gave prior to the video, from the capital S Spirit of God within you to the small s spiritual influence, there's a reason there's difference. Small s has no power over you, but what you give it. You hold the living capital S Spirit of God within you. That's the power you have. The most powerful force within all creation, present within you. If you give that power over to the small s spiritual, they will define you. The experiences that you walk will come from that place of small s spiritual anxiety, fear, sadness, sickness, disorder, disease. Like your friend mentioned, that disorder of sickness or whatever in the article that you read at the beginning. If people are allowing for that to be the defining aspect, I deal with people that are psychiatrists, PhDs in different places, and they're asking these simple questions like, well, how did you deal with your trauma? I'm like, well, first of all, it's not trauma. First of all, I'm not defined by my experiences. I am defined by one thing, God, and I seek God first. And then I allow God to use my experiences to bless other people in ways that God can use them to magnify his glory. I'm not sitting here wanting recompense for somebody that harmed me. I'm not sitting here wanting punishment for an individual that beat me to death and buried me in the ground for 14 hours. I'm not sitting here wanting any suffrage to come against somebody for something that they did when they financially stole money or whatever. I would rather let God define me in this moment and allow God to use those experiences to bless those people in need or walking their life experience. Again, the only way that can be done is, like Ina Marie says, coming before God like a child, welcoming in the fullness of God's presence and trusting in God's love to guide us in the living prayer of life. How would I move If God's love is in me now toward this person that may have wronged me in the past, I can see them differently. They hold no power over me. They do not define me. Their actions have defined the nature of what's governing them spiritually. So from within God's love, I pray freedom from the spirit of larceny that they chose. I choose love for them. This other person over here chose deception to lay upon our relationship. I choose to release the small s spiritual deception that they would be increased in integrity. That's the way I have to move through God's love for the sake of them, God's love for the sake of how God wishes to use me. So that would be my closing remarks, is to move to these simple experiences we've had in the earthly experiences with our friends, those people that would name themselves enemy, our corporate interactions, our clients that we work with, to deal with people first out of God's love. And I don't mean like a deer in the headlights wondering, oh my God, am I going to put myself in harm's way again? No, I mean choosing God first, and you will not be put in harm's way. You will move with a heightened discernment. You will be able to pray for them, but you will also not be put in a place of harm again, because you are now governed by God, not blindness to end up in the snares of somebody that could harm you. God first, holy love first, divine wisdom emerges from that. And discernment presents as well.
I'm simply amazed how our conversations always unfold, and in such a beautiful way. And I appreciate all your input, and I hope that all our listeners take from this a lot of information they can use. And I also want to mention again, our website is gracehealing.org. Our YouTube channel, where we post this video and where we have many other videos posted, is gracehealing.video. And we will have a document ready for you on our website with the instructions that we just shared about the spirit and the spiritual, and have that available soon for you. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we embrace God's love for you all, and thank God for this time with you. And we pray and trust that God's holy love will rise within you throughout this week.
And we love you all very dearly, and thank you as you engage in deepening God's love for you.